Welcome back, everyone. In this lesson, I'm going to show you how to work with attribute tables in ArcGIS. You already know a little bit about using attribute tables in Arc, but in this lesson, I'm going to show you some things we didn't talk about last time, including freezing and hiding fields, how to access attribute properties, setting aliases on fields, zooming to and centering on features in your attribute table, summarizing based on your fields, and calculating geometry from your fields. These are all tools that'll help you in your analysis workflows, and it's up to you how you use them. You don't have to, but they are good to know about. So let's start by opening up the attribute table on our protected areas data set. We saw this a bit in the last class when we first introduced ArcGIS. So I'll open up the attribute table. And let's start by freezing some fields so that we can view them whenever we scroll to the right and have them as context for the other attributes. The most natural one here is the owner name for these protected areas. So maybe I'd want to know, whenever I'm looking at anything else, who owns the land. So I can right click on it and I can go to freeze/unfreeze column, and it moves it over to the left and makes this thick line there. And if I scroll to the right, you'll see that it stays with me and I can see it regardless of where I am in the attribute table, so that I can look at the rest of the record and know the name at the same time. And if I scroll down, that scrolls appropriately, just like it should. This is probably pretty familiar to those of you who've used spreadsheet software. It works just like freezing fields in that kind of software too. If I wanted to turn this off, I'd go back to the field and I'd right click and I'd click freeze unfreeze column again, and it unfreezes it. So I can see that if I scroll to the right, it no longer stays, but it stayed in the same spot now because it moved it to the left. So if I want to move it, I click on it at the top so that the whole field's highlighted, and then I click again and drag, and I get that drag icon on my cursor, and then I can move it back to where it was. And now it's in the appropriate spot again, if I cared about the ordering of the fields. You can do this moving to any other fields as well. So if I want to move category somewhere else just to sort it so that I can see it in a different way, I could do that at any time. I might also decide that maybe I want to hide some fields that aren't super relevant to me so that I don't have to sort through them all the time. So if I right click on this manager name, which I might hide because it's empty here and it's not providing me a lot of information, or for any other reason you decide, I can right click on it and I can just select turn field off. And now I can't see it anymore. If I need to bring that field back for any reason so I can see it again, I can go to the menu in the top left here and go to turn all fields on, and it comes right back up. Some other kind of obvious things you might expect are that you can change field sizes by just clicking on that spot where it gives you that move icon in there, or that resize icon, and I can just change the size of the fields. Now let's take a quick look at the properties of fields. So I can select the whole field again, and I can go to properties, and I can see some things that we saw in lectures in the last class, but we might understand a few of them a little more now. So first, I can see that this field has the name own_name, no spaces whatsoever. That's good practice for your fields. But it has an alias of owner name, which is what we see in the attribute table here. And then I can see the data type of string, which we now understand to mean it carries text. I could change the alias here. Let's say I just want to make it say owner instead. And if I change it and I click OK, notice that the field heading over here updates. I didn't actually change the field name, I just changed the alias that we can use to access it. Okay, now let's see about how we can navigate within the attribute table. So I'll shrink this a little so we can see more of our map here. And if I found some features that maybe I wanted to see where they were, the Cache River Land and Water Reserve, I can select them by just clicking and dragging on these left-hand boxes over here. And I can right click and get a zoom to selected option. And it calculates and goes and finds those features and updates my view to show me them. And then they are selected and highlighted in here. If I found some other features that I was interested in, but I wanted to keep my scale. So say I was zoomed out a little further and I didn't want to zoom in anymore, but I found these features, I could select those features. Let's turn off the base map to speed things up here. So if I turn off the base map, okay, that renders. So if I zoom out to a scale like this, I can then find some other features, maybe some other features I'd be interested in here. And I can right click on them, and it's doing a little bit of a weird thing here. So let's just choose one. And I can pan to. And it will kind of give me a quick highlight of it if it's not already selected. And if I wanted the one that was selected here, I can right click on it and go to pan to it, and it will keep the zoom at the same level. It'll keep the scale at the same level, but it will take me to where that is centered in my viewport here. Okay, now let's add a new field and let's calculate geometry. So since this is in a geodatabase, it already has a shape area field, but that shape area field is in the units of the coordinate system. So in this case, it's in square meters, and that's a really large number to kind of process. We don't have a good sense for this stuff without having to do some conversions in our head. So let's add a square kilometers or square miles field here. So let's go to the menu and go to add field. And I'm going to type in area square kilometers. And I'm going to make this a field of type double because it's going to be a decimal number, remember, and I want double precision on it. So if I do that and click OK, it adds a field full of null values here. And now I can right click and I could do field calculator as we've done before, or I could go to calculate geometry. And that's what I'm going to do in this case. And I'm going to calculate it in the coordinate or use the coordinate system of the data source, because in this case, I'm using a coordinate system that preserves area correctly. Up at the top here, I get to select the property. And in this case, it selected area by default for me. And then I can select the units that it calculates them in down here. So I'll select square kilometers, and it's trying to calculate only the selected records. As we've learned, it does that by default since I have one record selected down here. So I'm going to uncheck that box because I want it to calculate all of them for me, and I'll click OK. And it finishes calculating and gives me the amounts in square kilometers, which makes sense given what we see in the square meters value here. And now I'm going to right click, I'm going to go to properties, and I'm going to give this an alias of area in square kilometers. So you don't have to spend that just split second interpreting that in your head every time. And when we view it, that's what we see. And now that we've added our new area field, I'm going to go and I want to know how much area does each landowner manage. So to do that, I'm going to go back to the owner over here. And I'm going to right click and go to summarize. And it says select a field to summarize, and it has own name. It doesn't use the alias. So you'll have to recognize that that's the same. And if you got confused, you can go and look at the alias on the field. And I'm going to summarize by owner name. And what it says is it creates a new table containing one record for each unique value of the selected field. So every unique owner name is going to have a record along with statistics summarizing any of the other fields. So in this case, I'm going to go down here to our area square kilometers field, and I want to know the total area that the owner manages. And let's also see the average size of the polygon they manage. We saw some artifacts in the polygon sizing before with those little slivers that were selected, but in this, for just this example, we'll do this. And I could specify an output location. It's putting it in a Scratch geodatabase I have, and that's fine. And again, I'm going to uncheck the summarize on the selected records only and click OK. It finishes and it offers to add it to the map, and I'll click yes. So now I have it in my table of contents under some output, and I'll right click on it and go to open. And down here where my attribute table is, I get a new tab. So there's a tab here for protected areas, and there's a tab here for some output. And it gives me a slightly cryptic version of the output here, but it does summarize or it gives me the sum and the average of the areas in square kilometers here. But who are the owners? Why are they all of a sudden these integer values here, or these numbered values here that have zeros in front? Well, this isn't a particularly typical example, but this data does something special with how it stores these owner names, and it uses something called a domain in order to specify specific coded values that code for a text value. And in the attribute table, it shows you that text value instead of these coding values here. If I wanted to go look up what those coding values are, I would go to the catalog window here, and I would find my data set. And here it is. And I go to properties. And under the subtypes tab, not the domain tab, surprisingly, there is a domains option down here. And if I click on that, and then I go to my owner name field up here, I get the codes and the descriptions on the right here. So I can see that 0125 codes for Fish and Wildlife Service. The end result of this is we still have the answer, but occasionally it can be a little more difficult to figure out what this answer of the average and summarized square kilometer area actually relates back to. In your real data, you often won't encounter these types of data. It comes from really large projects that are managing the data in ways that enable them to keep their data consistent usually. But just in case you do encounter it at any point, I wanted you to see this. Okay, that's all I'm going to show you in this lesson about vector attribute tables. I showed you how to freeze and unfreeze fields, how to hide and re-show fields, how to access the attribute properties, how to set and view field aliases and their data types, how to zoom and pan to records, and how to summarize based upon calculated values in our attribute table. I hope these help you navigate and analyze your data more efficiently. See you next time.